I never planned to work for an alien corporation, let alone report directly to one, but rent was due, and the job offer promised impossible benefits, a salary beyond anything on Earth, and health coverage that claimed to work on multiple species. The building looked normal from the outside, just another glass tower in the city, but once inside, gravity felt slightly lighter and the air shimmered like heat over metal. That was when I met her. Director Zara Vulath stood taller than any human executive I had seen, her skin a soft silver blue that reflected the lights, her eyes sharp and luminous like polished gems, and her voice calm but commanding. She was my boss, and she was definitely not human. For weeks I focused only on my work, translating interstellar contracts, coordinating Earth-side operations, and pretending it was normal when Kirkas casually discussed trade routes between star systems. Then one evening, she summoned me to her office after hours. She stood near the window overlooking the city, hands clasped behind her back, and without turning around, she said that she had a personal matter requiring my assistance. I assumed it was another negotiation or cultural briefing, until she faced me and said she needed me to pretend to be her husband for one Earth year. My brain froze, my mouth opened, and no sound came out. She explained calmly that her species valued political stability through bonded leadership, and that her rivals questioned her authority because she remained unmarried. A human spouse would be exotic, non-threatening, and legally flexible, she said. I tried to decline politely, but she reminded me of my contract, the bonuses involved, and the protection her influence could offer. When I finally nudged, she smiled slightly, and that was when I realized my life had just shifted onto a completely different orbit. The transformation began immediately. I was relocated to a secure residence that blended alien technology with human comfort, and instructed on how to act like the bonded partner of a high-ranking alien official. Zara was professional at work, but different at home, more relaxed, curious about human habits, and occasionally amused by my discomfort. Public appearances followed, galas with diplomats from dozens of worlds, press events where cameras hovered like insects, and endless questions about our relationship. We told the same story every time, how we met through collaboration, how mutual respect became affection, how love transcended species. At night, when the doors closed and the silence settled, we dropped the act. We talked honestly about her pressure as a leader, about my ordinary life on Earth, about how strange it felt to share space with someone who technically belonged to another galaxy. Despite the contract, boundaries were clear, separate rooms, no physical expectations, and absolute consent on all fronts. That made it easier, safer, and somehow more intimate. Slowly, I noticed the way she listened when I spoke, the way she adjusted her pace to match mine when we walked, the way her voice softened when she laughed. I reminded myself it was temporary, a role, a year, nothing more. Trouble arrived in the form of an alien council inspection. They came unannounced, suspicious, observant, and clearly searching for any weakness in Zara's authority. Our performance had to be flawless. During the inspection, we were questioned together, observed during meals, and subtly tested with cultural cues meant to expose false bonds. I expected to fail, but somehow we moved in perfect sync, responding naturally, supporting each other without planning it. At one point, an inspector implied that a human could never truly bond with an alien leader. Before I could speak, Zara placed her hand over mine, a gesture warm and steady, and stated that strength came from choice, not origin. That moment felt real, not scripted, not contractual. Later that night, neither of us mentioned it, but something had changed. The lines between role and reality blurred. I found myself caring whether she slept well, whether council pressure weighed too heavily on her, whether she trusted me beyond the agreement. As months passed, rumors spread not of weakness, but of admiration. Zara's leadership stabilized, trade routes flourished, and her rivals fell silent. Our arrangement had worked too well. Then she received an offer to formalize the bond permanently, not legally binding on Earth, but symbolically powerful across the alliance. She did not command me, she asked. I struggled with the choice, knowing that agreeing would change everything, knowing that refusing might hurt her more than any political attack. For the first time, the decision felt personal, not professional. We talked through the night, honestly, vulnerable, acknowledging that what began as strategy had become something deeper. She admitted she feared losing me when the year ended, and I admitted I feared wanting to stay. When the year concluded, the galaxy waited for an answer. At a final council assembly, Zara stood before her people and declared that the bond had fulfilled its purpose and that she would now choose freely. She looked at me, not as a director, not as a commander, but as someone hopping. I stepped forward, heart racing, and stated that I was no longer pretending. The council erupted in reaction, surprise, curiosity, approval, but none of it mattered. What mattered was that the choice was mutual, unforced, and real. I came to work for an alien corporation. I stayed because I fell in love with my alien boss. And for the first time, the future felt limitless, across stars, across worlds together. The moment I declared that I was no longer pretending, the weight of the galaxy seemed to shift. The council chamber buzzed with layered voices from dozens of species, translators humming softly as emotions rippled through the air. Zara did not move at first, but I felt her breath steady beside me, a silent anchor in the storm. Tradition demanded deliberation, and the council recessed for several hours, leaving us alone in a private antechamber guarded by silent sentinels. The doors sealed, and for the first time since the announcement, there was nothing to perform, nothing to explain. Zara finally turned toward me, her composed expression breaking into something raw and uncertain. "You understand what this means," she said quietly, not as a leader, but as a woman standing on the edge of a future she could not fully control. I told her I did, that choosing her meant leaving behind the simple version of my life, that it meant scrutiny, danger, and a responsibility far larger than myself. I also told her that walking away now would haunt me for the rest of my life. Her hand found mine again, not for show, not for strategy, but because she needed the contact as much as I did. For her species, touch carried meaning far deeper than casual human gestures. A signal of trust and shared intent. When the council reconvened, they announced that the bond would be recognized provisionally, subject to a final cultural integration period. In simpler terms, we were given another year, not as a contract, but as a test of sincerity. Life changed immediately. Security increased, schedules tightened, and every movement we made was logged and analyzed. But within the confines of our residence, something gentler emerged. We stopped pretending to live separate lives. Mornings began with shared meals, awkward at first, then comforting. We learned each other's rhythms, her need for quiet reflection before dawn, my habit of thinking best with a cup of strong coffee in hand. She taught me about her homeworld, a place of crystalline plains and violet skies, where leadership was earned through endurance and wisdom rather than inheritance. I told her about Earth, about crowded cities, chaotic politics, and the strange human ability to hope even when logic suggested otherwise. Physical closeness developed slowly, cautiously, always communicated, always chosen. For her people, intimacy was layered, emotional alignment preceding any physical expression. When she finally rested her forehead against mine, it felt more profound than any dramatic gesture I had known before. Not everyone approved. A faction within the alliance saw me as a liability, a human variable in an otherwise controlled equation. Threats began subtly, anonymous data breaches, whispered doubts planted among delegates, quiet attempts to undermine my credibility. Zyra shielded me where she could, but I refused to be hidden. I studied interstellar law, cultural protocols, and diplomatic strategy with a focus that surprised even myself. If I was going to stand beside her, I would not be ornamental. The first real test came during a trade summit on a neutral station orbiting a dying star. The atmosphere was tense, old rivalries resurfacing under the pressure of resource scarcity. When a delegate openly challenged Zyra's judgment by questioning her bond with me, the room fell silent. Before she could respond, I stepped forward, voice steady despite my racing heart. I spoke not as her husband, but as her partner, outlining how our collaboration had strengthened negotiations, improved transparency with Earth, and created new channels of trust. I cited outcomes, not emotions, stability metrics, not romance. The challenge dissolved under scrutiny, replaced by reluctant respect. Later alone, Zyra embraced me fully for the first time, her arms strong, grounding, and unmistakably real. That night we acknowledged what we had both avoided naming. What began as pretense had become commitment. Not because of obligation, but because neither of us wanted a future without the other in it. As the months passed, the galaxy adjusted. Headlines shifted from scandal to fascination. Human-alien bonds became a topic of academic study, diplomatic debate, and cautious optimism. I visited her homeworld under heavy escort, stepping onto alien soil while millions watched. The gravity felt different, the air sharp with unfamiliar minerals. Her people observed silently as she introduced me not as a symbol, but as family. Acceptance was not immediate, but it was sincere. Elders tested me with questions about sacrifice, loyalty, and resilience. I answered honestly, admitting fear, doubt, and uncertainty, but affirming my choice regardless. The final trial was symbolic, a solitary vigil beneath the open sky. I stood alone for hours as twin moons rose and fell, reflecting on everything I had left behind and everything I stood to gain. When Zyra returned at dawn, her expression told me I had passed. Our bond was formally recognized soon after, not as a political necessity, but as a union acknowledged by two civilizations. There was no grand ceremony, no spectacle, just a quiet moment where we pledged to choose each other again and again. I never stopped being human. I never became alien. But somewhere between the stars, we became something new together. Leadership remained challenging, danger never vanished, and the universe stayed unpredictable. Yet every time I looked at her across a room filled with powerful beings, I knew I belonged there, not because of position, but because of trust. The year that began as a contract had turned into a lifetime. Not written in ink or law, but in shared decisions, shared risks, and shared hope. And as we looked toward an uncertain future among the stars, neither of us felt alone. Peace never announces its departure. It fades quietly, leaving tension in its place. The first warning came as a routine security briefing, flagged as low priority, but delivered with unusual urgency. A coalition of fringe systems had begun mobilizing fleets near contested space, citing concerns about cultural contamination and hybrid leadership models. Zyra absorbed the report in silence, her expression unreadable. I watched her closely, recognizing the familiar weight settling on her shoulders, the cost of being a symbol whether she wanted to be or not. The alliance response was cautious, negotiations first, pressure second, force as a last resort. But the opposition did not want compromise, they wanted precedent erased. That meant us. Threat assessments escalated, routes were rerouted, appearances cancelled. Security advised temporary separation, suggesting that my presence increased risk vectors. Zara dismissed the idea immediately. She stated that unity under pressure mattered more than optics, and that fear-driven decisions were how empires fractured. I felt a surge of pride mixed with concern, knowing her defiance would inspire loyalty and hostility in equal measure. The attack did not come as a fleet. It came as silence. Communications failed during a diplomatic transit through a narrow corridor of space, navigation flickered, and the stars outside warped unnaturally. We were pulled out of standard travel into a dead zone, a place stripped of signal and law. Emergency protocols engaged automatically, sealing bulkheads and activating defensive systems. I remained calm outwardly, though my pulse thundered in my ears. Zyra moved with precision, issuing commands, coordinating crew responses, her voice steady and absolute. In that moment, I saw her not as my partner, not even as a leader, but as a force shaped by responsibility and resolve. Hostile vessels emerged without warning, their signatures unfamiliar, designs angular and aggressive. They hailed us on an open channel, demanding her surrender and my removal from Alliance territory. Zyra's response was brief. She refused. The first strike shook the ship violently, alarms cascading through corridors. Crew members held their positions, trust in her leadership unshaken despite the danger. I was escorted to a secure compartment, a precaution I hated but understood. Even there, I could feel the battle unfolding through vibrations and distant impacts. Minutes stretched endlessly. Every sound carried the possibility of loss. Then silence returned, heavier than before. The hostile vessels withdrew abruptly, driven off by an Alliance rapid response fleet that had tracked our disappearance. Damage reports followed, casualties minimal, systems repairable. We had survived, but the message was clear. Later, in the quiet aftermath, Zyra came to me without guards or formality. She rested her forehead against mine, breathing unevenly for the first time since I had known her. She admitted fear, not of defeat, but of losing what we had built. I admitted the same, acknowledging that loving her meant standing in the path of storms meant for empires. News of the attack spread quickly. Public opinion shifted sharply, outrage replacing skepticism. Support poured in from systems that saw the assault as proof of the threat posed by intolerance. The opposing coalition fractured under diplomatic pressure, some leaders retreating, others doubling down in isolation. War was avoided narrowly, balance restored temporarily. In the aftermath, Zyra addressed the Alliance openly. She spoke of unity without uniformity, of strength born from choice rather than fear, of a future where cooperation was not limited by origin. She did not mention me directly. She did not need to. Later, when the noise faded and the galaxy turned its attention elsewhere, we returned to our shared space. The residence felt different, no longer just a home or a symbol, but a refuge. We talked about limits, about how much we were willing to risk, about the kind of future we wanted to defend. For the first time, we discussed stepping back someday, not in retreat, but in transition, mentoring new leaders, shaping systems rather than ruling them. The idea felt distant but grounding, a reminder that even stars evolved. That no role was eternal. That night, as artificial light dimmed to simulate Earth dusk, Zyra took my hand and asked a question without political weight or strategic intent. She asked if I was happy. I answered honestly. I told her I was afraid, challenged, exhausted, and fulfilled in ways I never imagined possible. She smiled softly, a rare unguarded expression meant only for me. She said that was the closest translation her language had for happiness. Beyond the windows, ships moved like constellations in motion, carrying lives, choices, and futures across the dark. Somewhere out there, forces still opposed what we represented. But for that moment, we stood together, grounded not by power or position, but by mutual trust. And I understood that whatever came next, conflict or calm, rise or retreat, we would face it as we always had, Not because we were bound by contract, not because the galaxy demanded it, but because we chose each other.